Hi, today we're going to continue our look into American expansion into world affairs by introducing World War One. And before we can understand America's role in World War One and how it kind of um, was used as an opportunity to increase our global presence, we have to actually introduce the cause of World War One to understand the nature of fighting and what the Americans actually did once we went over there. So let's look at the causes of World War One today and kind of the beginning of the war. And to do that, we are going to go back to the 1800s, again, the 1870s, where the Prussian Chancellor Otto von Bismarck begins German unification under Prussian military culture. What we really need to understand in this process is that the nationalistic drive to unite Germany, all German speaking people under one control, specifically that control of that military culture and military dominance, is going to impact the German cultural identity for a little less than a century, and be a major part of the both global wars. Okay, so what we have here is a map that's just going to show you the general expansion of Prussia and uniting under the German kingdom through these 6 years. And there are a lot of little individual kingdoms within this, but you get the general idea of the territorial gains happening in a very short period of time. And those territorial gains create this new empire in Central Europe. And that empire is going to threaten the Russians and the French. They're going to take this territory right here, Alsace and Lorraine. They're going to take that from the French in 1871. So immediately you have an enemy on your western border who is threatened by you, and you've already taken territory from them that they want back. Now, again, nationalistic pride here. The Germans are comfortable doing this because they think because they're German, they are entitled to that territory and that they are superior to the French, and the French won't want to fight them. And the French thinking the same thing. And then you have the Russian Empire over on the east, right? Who is now, seeing a new emergent empire on its western border, and is threatened by that. And they have some other territorial ambitions we're going to talk about in a minute. Either way, this new German empire upsets the balance of power in Europe, which really wasn't stable to begin with, ever. Okay, so they're gonna expand their military and their navy, and it's gonna threaten Britain. So basically, Germany just kind of busts onto the scene and has a bunch of enemies just right off the bat. But their unification is motivated by nationalistic tendencies under Prussian military culture. Now, we also have at this time, this general idea is a way bigger time. We have the question mark here because it doesn't really end until after World War I, the unification of Italy, which is undergoing the same process, just over a much longer period of time, where we see the nation state of Italy emerge under unification of all Italian speaking people. So now you have Italy with more territorial ambitions, including aspects of Austria-Hungary, but another threat to the European power structure, which up until that point was dominated by Britain and France. Okay, so along with this, we have two new empires. Okay, along with this, we see down here the Ottoman Empire, or the Turks. They are in the process of collapsing, you could say. They were once controlled this whole area of southeastern Europe known as the Balkans. And now these nations like Serbia have gained temporary independence from that Ottoman Empire. And what the Russians see are access to the Mediterranean and some nationalistic justifications in terms of like Slavic origins of these people. What the Austro-Hungarians see is territorial expansion, where the Ottomans recede, the Austrians want to take, all right? And then a way to, again, kind of box the Russians in a little bit. And then the Italians, they're concerned about, gaining access to this territory here of Austria-Hungary, okay, but also their northern border here in France. So they're kind of like in between, what will become the major alliances. And you have France concerned with retaking Alsace and Lorraine and emergent Germany. You have Russia concerned with all of this as well. And then, of course, the sun never sets in the British Empire, and the British want to keep controlling essentially the entire world, right? And problems in Europe become their problems as well. So what you have with German unification is this really tenuous situation. And there's a whole system of alliances that, Bismarck is able to negotiate, to make sure the Russians aren't concerned and those kinds of things. But eventually, the French are able to isolate, Central Europe by teaming up with the Russians, which is a really good policy of deterrence, because now the Germans know that if they go to war with France, they have to fight a war on two fronts, which is something you definitely want to avoid if you at all possible. So if you're ever starting a war out there, try to do it only on one front if you're going to do that. Just a little helpful advice. Maybe don't start wars either. Okay, so we have a situation where, we have a readiness for war. We have a complicated system of alliances, which is going to drag a bunch of different people into this war. And we have a catalyst in the Balkans, all beginning with this unification of Italy and Germany. All right, the Italian territorial ambition is not satisfied by this unification. They want more. All right, so the power structures are threatened. So we have the general French and German, animosity towards one another. The Russians have a lot of instability at this time. This is right, World War I will eventually be one of the catalysts for the communist revolution, but that's been ongoing. They have issues with Japan on their other borders. Their empire is in a tenuous situation. The Austro-Hungarian ambitions in the Balkans, the Ottoman power vacuum as a result there, and then general global imperialism creating even more conflicts because all these nations want to trade with the same territories. And if the British don't have the strongest navy in the world, that means they can't keep their empire. And the Germans are building a strong navy in this, this emergent empire now builds this navy so that they can project their power globally as well. So they burst onto the scene with their global empire, creating tension everywhere, and a general readiness for war, right? So the result is a complicated system of alliances, but by the time World War I starts, we're down to two: the Triple Entente with Britain, France, and Russia, and the Triple Alliance with Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. This is not like formal, like if we declare war, you go with us. They're more defensive agreements and just a general statement of friendship between nations. But in general, the global, the European powers understand that it's basically, for sure France and Russia with one another to isolate Germany. And it's for sure Germany and Austria-Hungary with one another to protect against Russian and French expansion. Okay. All right. So we got to introduce an important term here, which is militarism, or the aggressive buildup of arms. It's not just like having a military, but it's aggressively like we're going to create a strong military for the intention of invading somebody else. So when the Germans create their navy, this is an act of militarism. And the British are going to respond by building their navy up, and the French are going to respond by building their army up, and so on and so forth. All right. So we have, this tension, we have aggressive military buildup, we have motive, right, with the imperial goals. And basically, and by 1914, all these nations are just kind of waiting for a reason to go to war. And no one's really looking to avoid this war, thanks to their belief in their supremacy of their own culture and people, their belief in the supremacy of their military. Even if their military is not as strong, they just think that they're a national, the French people are just better than the German people, so that they won't surrender. And it becomes, no one is looking for a way out because they all think they can win if they strike first. That's that militarism aspect too. As long as we have momentum, we'll win. And that brings us to this situation. where we have, these powers aligned against each other with military strength, ready to fight. And the Germans create this plan known as the Schlieffen Plan, where they're going to avoid a war on two fronts. And we'll talk more about that in the next video. But before we go, there are four main causes of World War I that we discussed today, those being militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Militarism, the aggressive buildup of arms, alliances in the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance, the imperialistic goals of all of these nations, not just in Europe and the Balkans, but worldwide, and the nationalistic tendencies, the jingoism of the day, to push us into conflict with one another, and also, like we talk about, the unification of Italy and Germany, the goal of uniting people together that speak the same language, even against their will. And then you have in the Balkans the nationalistic tendency towards independence, which is going to resist empire, which is going to start being the catalyst for all of these conflicts there. So we'll talk about the German Schlieffen Plan and the assassination of Franz Ferdinand and the actual start of the war and the nature of fighting in the next one.